Okay, it's been a couple weeks here, so I figure I should chime in and let everybody know what's going on in the increasingly inaccurately named SDC world. So, let's see. First of all, I've of course been reading over and over again, and more of the Book of Urantia. The Urantia book, excuse me. And also doing a lot of thinking and putting things together. And I thought that this time it'd be good to just kind of recap everything that's happened to this point, because there's been so much, and I know there's probably at least a few people that run along these videos, the later ones, and don't have the time or patience or whatever to go back to the very beginning and cover every single thing that's gone on, now that it's like a good 10 hours worth or more of stuff. So I guess it'd be good to give a brief review of what we've covered so far and what's going on. So first of all, I started out this organization calling it SDC, which was supposed to stand for Solomon, Davis, and Casey. And those three individuals, namely Paul Solomon, Andrew Jackson Davis, and Edgar Casey, were the only three individuals I knew of at the time that were what I currently call channeling psychics. And what is a channeling psychic? Well, a channeling psychic, actually that might not be the best term, because somebody, when they hear channeling medium or channeling psychic, they probably, first of all, normally think about a person that's channeling a dead spirit or somebody's spirit that's passed on. So if somebody wants to contact their dead father or something, then they may go to a channeling medium or something, and that medium supposedly may or may not be able to contact that spirit, who will then maybe talk through the medium or something. Now, the reason I still insist on calling these psychics channeling psychics is because in a sense that's what they do, but there are some important differences. The first important difference is that they never ever do that. They never have a spirit, like a human spirit, soul, talk through the channel. Instead, what you get are other types of entities talking through the channel. Now, again, this may be confused with demon possession, which a fundamentalist Christian background, you would know about demon possession. And I would say that the difference between demon possession and what I call a valid channeling psychic is that there's a matter of benevolence and control. So as far as what we know from these sources, if your orientation is good, if your focus is on good and on ideals, and in that sense you've taken the necessary precautions, because seemingly your focus on higher ideals, on God, on Christ, on things that are of that nature, that protects you from arbitrary possession by whatever entities may be trying to take control of a channel that's receptive whenever you're trying to channel. So this spills onto the whole Ouija board and things, and so on the one hand, yes, it is that type of thing. We are getting into that type of territory. On the other hand, for those of you that are versed only in those conventional types of interaction with the psychic realm, I would like to point out that this is a new type, a different type of channeling, a different type of connection. Because as it turns out, if you have a talented individual that is so attuned, and that individual has taken the appropriate precautions to avoid possession by negative or controlling sources, then there's an opportunity for a third or fourth, whatever, type of channeling. And what this involves is channeling what would be thought of as benevolent entities. So first and foremost, being our own higher self. And see, already now we're getting onto territory where the conventional layman's understanding of even pedantic religious belief doesn't account for some of this stuff, and we have to cover some basics. And again, I'm saying this with the authority of one who has read a lot of different sources, and they all agree on these things. And one of the basics, one of the ABCs here, is this idea of a higher self. The Urantia book calls the higher self a mystery monitor or a thought adjuster. And the whole concept is that there are a few key components to what we are. We have our animalistic self, we have our developing personality, we have a soul that, according to the Urantia book, is gradually being developed and created by all this interaction that's going on. We all, or may have come from, have been around for a while and have come back if you listen to the other sources, but some disagreement there maybe. And also we have a spirit of God that is given to us in some sense, and then apparently maybe separate from that, we have this higher self or mystery monitor, which is, if you will, God himself, or a part of God himself, that dwells with each of us personally, or at least has ever since the coming of Jesus Christ, according to the Urantia book. But that is one of the key first steps here to understanding this channeling thing, then, is this concept of a higher self or a thought adjuster. And the reason they use such a silly term like that is because it's very descriptive of the key role that this piece of God within us plays. And that role on a day-to-day basis is one of guidance. So if we are receptive and attuned to our own higher self, to God within us, then we will get day-to-day guidance from this higher self that will help us grow, that will help us come closer to God, come closer to perfection, for those of us who desire perfection or to become more perfect as God is perfect. And anyway, so that higher self apparently is one of the first entities, if you'll consider it a separate entity, that is contacted through this process of benevolent channeling. And at the time I started this series, back in like October or November or something of last year, there were 3 that I knew of, that I had found so far. It was miraculous to me that I had found more than just one, because for 10 years before that, I only knew about one, which was Edgar Cayce, probably currently the most popular of the channeling psychics. So there were 3 to begin with that I knew of that could contact this higher self. But there's more to it than that. From time to time in the readings, you'll find what we, I guess, in the layman's terms, we call angels or archangels, without really knowing much about the hierarchy or organization. That's what we call them. Some of those entities have communicated through each of these channels. Well, I'm not sure about Davis, but at least Solomon and Cayce from time to time. So that would be another type of communication. And furthermore, there seem to be, sources all seem to kind of agree that there are a handful of benevolent entities that kind of follow each one of us, or at least a lot of us. And like these channeling psychics, they'll have maybe a group of 3 to 5 individuals. That could include some types of angels, could include some types of men, disembodied spirits, although those don't seem to ever communicate through the channel. I want to reiterate that. But at least there seems to be a group of individuals that can be tapped into and sought for agreement and consensus when a question is asked. And if you hear some of these psychics, they'll talk about reaching other minds or talking to other minds. And I think those are some of the other minds they contact, but they also seem to be tapping into a universal subconscious mind, which, this brings us to another topic, which is the Akashic Record. And the Great Akashic Record is supposedly some type of codified, structured database of all information that has ever transpired in the universe. And keep in mind, this is a universe that is that transcends time. So the information in the Akashic Record isn't limited to what has happened up to a certain point. It also apparently seems to include lots of things that could happen in the future, depending on how a given timeline will go in a given instance. And then you get parallelism, which is, I think, important to think of things like this. You get simultaneous timelines, and it seems to be that this talk of past lives and things has a strong aspect to it that involves parallelism. So instead of thinking this in terms of, oh, I had this past life, and I've had 100,000 past lives, you can also think of it in terms of, oh, I have an almost infinite number of simultaneous existences in this universe that transcends time, and here's the record of all of them in this great Akashic record. However you want to look at it. But, and I'm sure that viewpoint has some drawbacks and errors and lack of understanding, but also I think the viewpoint of just a traditional past life understanding and with serial time also has some drawbacks and reflects some misunderstandings. So, that's one thing that I would like to drill home here. The more I get into this, the more I really get the sense that our own preconceived notions of the nature of reality get in the way when this information is given to us. It's like this brick wall that the information keeps running up against, where only so much can be revealed within the tiny, narrow framework of our concept of reality and time and space and past, present, and future and things. So, possibly obviously a problem when it comes to a complete and level understanding of all this stuff, but I think it's fairly consistent. You do get that kind of message from all these sources in different ways. But anyway, so a valid channeling psychic is able to contact this great Akashic record, perhaps through our own higher self, or contacting other entities or whatnot. And again, I'm not going to claim a complete understanding of how that entire process works, only that it does really apparently seem to occur. And even, boy, there's a lot of concurrence there with the Urantia book. It talks about some of the mechanics of how that record is constructed and who's responsible for it. And there's also a lot of information in the various readings, particularly a Paul Solomon reading that dealt specifically with the Akashic record. And I had an address a while back where I read some of that reading and talked about it. And they all seem to really agree that it's not just that you're tapping into the mind of God that knows everything. It's that this information is specifically recorded and structured for the purpose of being accessed, apparently. And so, once again, as you glimpse into this universe, you get this, or these perspectives on the universe, you get this picture of much more structure and order than we had previously imagined. I think in your typical day-to-day street person's understanding of the spiritual realm, if they believe in it, it's just limited to God sitting on a cloud with his harp and maybe St. Peter at the golden gates of heaven, and just no real clear notion of what's going on up there. There kind of is the spiritual realm, and maybe there's some demons or something going around, and maybe even a devil, but you don't really know. We don't have this concrete understanding of the detail and the hierarchy of these greater worlds beyond us. No understanding that even compares to our just typical understanding of the world we live in. So when you read information that does present a lot more structure, then in a way it's kind of disconcerting, but just really fascinating, and it does make sense, of course. If you just think about this academically or abstractly, it's like if these spiritual realms do exist, of course they're going to be just as ordered as, if not more, well, probably more so. If they're more advanced than ours, there will be more structure, more order than even what we have here. So, and obviously a lot more individuals involved too. So there we have it. And so generally you get these readings where a vast source of organized and coherent information is accessed, and it's presented in a coherent and organized fashion. Now, there may be good or bad days, depending on what the channel drank the night before or something. And there have been some cases where you get some bogus readings and things, and those are the source of a lot of the controversy around these things, or at least the people that are trying to find fault somewhere. That's where they find it, typically. But nevertheless, by and large, you get very, very detailed, logical, cohesive, coherent information, and it's not like what you would consider a typical medium channeling experience, where somebody's just kind of mumbling phrases and things that are kind of cryptic. Instead, what you get is readings, pages and pages of readings. Here, I'll dig into my stacks of books here to get a little visual aids action going on. You get readings, like here's a typical reading from Paul Solomon. And notice it starts out with a suggestion that the conductor gave to the channeling psychic to get him into the trance, or once he's in the trance, to suggest how to answer the questions. You have a question, you have an answer, and look at the answer. It just keeps going and going, and there are pages and pages. Like in Paul Solomon, typical readings, 5 or 10 pages long or more, with lots of questions and answers, and sometimes the answers are incredibly long, and you go from that to sometimes if a entity has been given this task of submitting a work, a real just cohesive work like a book, you'll get a different type of reading, like Andrew Jackson Davis and the Principles of Nature, where he has just one 800-page book he gives. Or you get the book of Urantia, the Urantia book, where you get a 2,000-page book made up of hundreds of papers that are delivered over the course of a year or two through a channel by other entities. And this stuff is clear. It's not even as obscure as the Book of Mormon or something. I mean, it's like in the case of the Book of Urantia and the Principles of Nature, it's a lot clearer than most literature written by your normal, average, everyday man that you read, which flies in the face of most people's concept of what a channeling psychic would be, or what psychic means, or what it can mean. And this is what I really tried to drive home with my introduction, and I guess I should stress it more, is that if you've got some preconceived idea of what a psychic is and you haven't heard of these types of people, then you're not really going to be able to grasp what the kind of clarity you can get. And that's what I'm trying to communicate, is that, hey, this is something different. This is, if you haven't heard of these people or these types of channels, this is something different than you've ever encountered before, in the sense that it is much more clear, and the information is much more comprehensive. Oh my gosh. And it's such a travesty that this phenomenon is so unknown in our world. It's like the vast, vast majority of people do not even know that these channels exist. And if they've heard of them, even a lot of people that have heard of them haven't even looked into it enough to know that they're any different than any other psychic or psychic channel that you might run across. But they are. And I was thrilled back last year to discover that there was more than just Edgar Cayce. I discovered one that came before Cayce, Andrew Jackson Davis, he was in the 1800s. And I discovered one that came after Cayce, Paul Solomon, and he just died in like 94. Wow, and that was enough to keep me like completely impressed and start this series where I just want to tell the world about it, and then right when the first or second address that I put on the internet here, some guys are telling me, oh wait, hey, there's more. What about Ross Peterson? What about Douglas Cottrell? And, you know, I hadn't heard of those people at all, of course. And so, you know, that leads me to discovering Ross Peterson, and his life pretty much, he lived at about the same time as Paul Solomon. Did a lot of his stuff in the 70s. Had a whole body of work. Has got somebody has posted some videos on, I think it's Google Video. You look up Ross Peterson, Edgar Casey or something, or however you want to look for those. They've got like 8, I think, readings of his or something that are posted that are just fantastic. And then there's some more snippets of readings in the book, this biography that's long out of print. It's by Alan Spraggett. There we go. And yeah, so that was one, and then but in a way, much more importantly, Douglas Cottrell, because Douglas Cottrell is still alive and healthy and giving readings like there's no tomorrow, and and I even got one. When I first heard about it, I'm like, oh my gosh! And so when we moved down here back to Iowa over Christmas, one of the first things I did right after Christmas is drove over to London, Ontario, my first trip to Canada, and got a reading for myself for the paltry sum of, or however you say that, of paltry sum of $550, or I think that's what they were charging at the time. And charging exorbitant fees is necessary, just because from what I hear, what ends up happening is the channel will just get overwhelmed with all these petty requests for readings that people don't really care that much about getting, but since it's free or only costs like $20 and they'll get one. So just in the interest of focusing focusing it down to the people that really, really want a reading, and giving the channel more time off, they charge a lot, and for me it was quite a big deal to have to scrape to get that much money, and we definitely won't be able to do it again for a while probably, but that's okay. I mean, man, just getting one reading like this in a lifetime is way more than you could hope for. So I'm not complaining. And so yeah, I got a fantastic reading from Douglas Cottrell, where I asked some questions that had really been burning inside my skull for a long time. And I posted that on the internet. If you're interested, just go to nasonschooler.com/SDC, and right on that page there I've got a link to the audio and also a transcript of the reading. And yeah, so Douglas Cottrell. And another thing about these channels is the volume of work. Douglas Cottrell has given, I just don't know how many thousands of readings. It's insane, whatever it is. And I was talking to his wife, and she was talking about how, because he's been giving them since the 70s, and they used to have like this garage full of cassette tapes of readings, and they finally just chucked them because she's like, what do you do with a garage full of readings? And I'm like, no, the loss is just unbelievable. But that also showed me something, my concept of what this phenomenon was kind of skewed by the Edgar Casey legacy. And it's not necessarily true that a channel is obligated to rigorously catalog and organize and publish the readings. In a way, it may not be practical, but whatever. Now, back at the time of Edgar Casey, they didn't have recording technology that was affordable, available, apparently, and so they had a stenographer. They had Gladys Davis sitting there for, after they got organized and got going with Edgar Casey, she was there for almost every single reading and transcribed every single one of them right there. And so they immediately had a written form of all of them, and they kept those organized and published, and now they're in a searchable database online. And that, to me, that's almost the best case scenario you can have with the readings. And I would love to see a day where all or a majority of these readings that have been given are transcribed and searchable in a database, all in one big database. But that might be a pipe dream, who knows? But so with the modern, what has happened with these modern channeling psychics, of course, is that it's much easier just to get a tape recorder, right? But then once you've got a cassette tape, well, it's a lot more work to transcribe that cassette than that you don't really have to do anymore. So what ends up happening, I think, by the just virtue of the path of least resistance, is that you end up just with a bunch of tapes, or now these days, of course, digital recordings, and that makes it easier. And the Cottrells did tell me now that since they make digital recordings of everything, it's much easier for them to organize and archive them, and they don't have a problem with throwing things out anymore, or having to throw things out anymore. But yeah, so, and that's another thing that you probably wouldn't typically expect if you hadn't heard about these kind of channels, is that they would be consistently cranking out such a volume of information. But that's what it's like. It seems to be the case that a given channel can stay under, meaning stay in a deep state of trance where they're acting as a channel, for a little over an hour and stay healthy. Apparently, from what I've read, one of the main things that happens is, since the organs shut down, that basically the metabolism of the body has shut down to a bare minimum, and the key organs are shutting down, like I guess the liver and kidneys or whatnot. So the problem is the toxins are no longer removed from the bloodstream, so they just continue to build up. And for health reasons, a channel can't stay under for like 8 hours at a time, something like that. So I just had a brief flash of some vision of this modern scientific approach where you have these psychics hook up to an IV and dialysis machines and all kinds of stuff to. Oh my gosh. Anyway, no. So the way this is normally done is the psychic just goes under for like an hour or so and gives a reading. But they can do this several times a day healthily, or I guess there's a limit, because apparently what killed Edgar Casey was around the time of World War II. He felt obligated to give a lot more readings than he should have, and they were giving readings maybe 8 hours a day or something, and with breaks. He would give a reading and take a little break, give a reading and take a little break. But that apparently was too hard on his system and eventually killed him. So it seems to be the Cottrells, he does a few a week, from what I can tell. I would just guess that he does maybe on average 5 readings a week or something like that. So it really spreads it out, paces himself, and he's not therefore killing himself. And the benefit to all of us is that he stays alive longer. And look, he's a healthy man in his early 60s or something, and still going strong. So the volume of information is really stupendous, and over time, therefore, these psychics are able to crank out a tremendous volume of work. Paul Solomon, I've heard one account where they say he gave 9,000 readings. I'm not sure how many of those are available or whatnot, but the Paul Solomon Foundation is currently releasing them from the most recent on back in kind of reverse order. I'm not sure how far back they'll be able to go, but the first volume was 700 pages, I think, with something like 80 readings, and I think volume 2 is going to be of similar size. It's coming out right about now or very soon here. And they're still working. Like I have been doing a little bit of proofreading work for them to kind of give things a final read or next to the last read before they go out. And we're working on volume 3 right now, I guess. So that's cool. And Ross Peterson, I don't think that there's currently any kind of transcription or collection effort. I think that's one of those cases where the only readings that exist are the people that happen to have kept their cassette tape they got back in like 1973 or whenever, and still have it and it still works, or they made a copy, so obviously a lot of the readings are going to be lost. And even if we get some kind of system where people are submitting them and we're transcribing them or something, or somebody's transcribing them, I have this view of hopefully growing my organization to the point where we can have an ongoing transcription effort of a lot of these readings from Peterson and Cottrell and whoever else we find. But, all in good time, I guess. So that's pretty much takes us to the end of last year. That's where I'd gotten. I had then discovered, so I knew about 5 sources in order of their appearance on the earth, starting with Andrew Jackson Davis, Edgar Casey, then Ross Peterson, Paul Solomon, and then Douglas Cottrell. So that's where we were then, and of course, as my reading indicated, I would find more. So yeah, what I've found so far is some things I might not necessarily classify as straight up channeling psychics, like the Betty books by Stuart Edward White. She was more into kind of sounds like an Andrew Jackson Davis style thing, but because later on he wasn't, sounds like he wasn't doing the straight up channeling anymore as much as throwing himself into a trance state somewhere along the line there, and at that point he was able to kind of cast his conscious mind into these realms and look at things from the psychic perspective and get some information from the Akashic record and things like that. So kind of a different process, prone more to coloration by the preconceptions and ideas of the conscious mind of the channel, of course, but with the benefit that they remain conscious and can direct the inquiry as they go along and things. So that's apparently the way Andrew Jackson Davis did his later books, like The Great Harmonia, which, man, I got to get going. I've been halfway through that book for like 3 months now. But so the Betty book seems to be, that lady seems to be, I think she became Betty White later on. She seems to be that type of or have been that type of a channel. So I don't know what really to call that. But and there are others. I don't know. I did, because in my reading, the Cottrell source told me to search for things like on the internet for people that could tell the future and things, and among those, that would be a way I could find some more. You look at what else they have done. Have they done some readings? Do they have other abilities? Blah, 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 blah. And it seemed to be that I had found, I don't know, two or three others that looked very promising in various stages of getting their work out. I mean, but it seems like just about all of them you could go and procure a reading from them. And I guess without having written readings that we can access, the only way to really tell would be to go to them and get a reading and see what kind of a reading you get. But the source did definitely say that there were more channels out there. Got the impression maybe a lot more. In Poland, he said maybe some in the Mormon Church. In Jehovah, I think he meant Jehovah's Witness denomination. So I anticipate finding more. And he did say that as these sources feel that it is the appropriate time, they will start to come forward. So I think in the next few years, definitely the next decade or so, we'll probably hear from a lot more of these types of prophets, channeling psychics, things like that. And I'll try to be as cognizant of those as I can, and as I find out about them more and more. But who knows? Maybe you'll hear about some on the news long before you hear about them from me, or wherever else. And sure, feel free if you're reading or listening to this address and you hear about some other channel that we haven't talked about, then by all means, yeah, pipe up and send me a message or post a comment to a video, and I'll definitely look into it and present it to everybody else. So, yeah, that's where I was, and I discovered those things. And then right around the time of my birthday, around January 21st, in a manner very similar to the manner in which I discovered Paul Solomon, meaning I was in kind of I guess, a more receptive state. I mean, I'm never really trying to be psychic or anything, but I just, sometimes I'll listen to music for a while, and it lets me, like instrumental music without words, so I can really think, just let my mind think about things, and do that for an hour or two. And I was doing that around the time of my birthday one night, and got inspired to look something up on the internet. And the same kind of thing happened when I discovered Paul Solomon. Back then, about a year ago, I was inspired to look up Halaliel on the internet, because it occurred to me, it's like, well, hey, that was the name of an angel that I'd never heard about through the Bible or any other source, that claimed it was an angelic being of some type that communicated through Casey. And I was like, well, hey, maybe if I just search for that term on the internet, I'll find some other channel that happened to tap into that same entity or something. And voila, I type in Halaliel in Wikipedia, and one of the first results that came up was Paul Solomon. And I read about him, and wow, that started this whole thing, this whole wow, there's more thing, because that same article that talks about him talks about Casey and Andrew Jackson Davis, and boy, actually, I should probably get in there and put in references to Ross Peterson and Douglas Cottrell, because that does need to be done. We've got to make it easier for people that are interested to find these people. I think it's very unfortunate that the ARE, the Edgar Casey organization, they just have this policy of not talking about other channels. They know about a lot more channels, but they just don't talk about them. They don't advertise them. So for those of us looking for more, it makes it very difficult. But nevertheless, anyway, so that's how I discovered Paul Solomon. And then I was doing the same type of thing, and I was inspired to look up trance. At the time, I was just thinking about trance music, because that's what I was listening to. But I don't know, I was kind of thinking about the whole phenomenon of trance and how that really was getting into these lighter trance states, because some of these sources would, well, actually the Graham Hancock book, wherever I put that thing, Supernatural, he talks about the different methods of getting yourself into a trance to where you can visualize the psychic realms or something. And some traditional methods were just dance and rhythm music type of things. And I'm thinking, yeah, well, in a way that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm probably getting into one of the lightest types of trance when I'm listening to this kind of stuff. And that seems to be part of the appeal of some of those types of music. So I decided to look it up, and that led me to, I don't know, while I was looking that up, I kind of thought of the Akashic Record, and I'm like, well, hey, why don't we look that up? Because wouldn't that be something where if there are other channels that tap into the Akashic Record, then that would be a pretty good indication that they're a valid channel of some type, right? So that was a really fruitful endeavor. You look up what people have written so far in Wikipedia about the Akashic Record, and there's some pretty useful information in there. And there was one little snippet where they happened to mention the Urantia book when they're talking about the Akashic Record. And I was like, oh, Urantia book? What's that? And so you look up that article on Wikipedia, and the rest is history. It's like, whoa. So that was around the time of my birthday, January 21st. And so here we are a month later, a little over a month later. And I have read a lot of it. My bookmark is right here. I haven't read everything up to that point, because I started getting into the beginning where they're talking about cosmology, and got, I don't know, a substantial way into that, and then started skipping around, and eventually got onto the section about everything about Christ and the stuff immediately preceding Christ, who he really was, and the spiritual realms, where he came from, what the story was, and then the life of Christ here on earth, and that whole thing. And I'm currently reading through that. I'm at the point where they've started their public ministry with the apostles, so towards the end of his life, and yeah, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So the Urantia book, what was that? Well, the people that brought the book forward seemed to be concerned with not revealing where the book came from. And the book itself indicates that that was one of the conditions placed upon the entities giving this information, was that uh, there was not to be any favoritism given to the channel through which the stuff was communicated. And I say channel, well, if you read about what is known about the background, it's pretty darn clear that what was going on was this doctor and his wife, back in like 1908 or something, were told about some guy that would go into these deep states of trance, and his wife couldn't wake him up, so she was all concerned, so she came to this doctor, and so that doctor's name was, I can't remember, I'd have to look it up. If you just read about the Urantia book, it has that whole story in the background and things. But so apparently what happened is this physician was interested in psychic phenomena and things as kind of a skeptic, and he had managed to disprove every supposed case to his satisfaction, disprove all cases of psychics, supposed psychics, as just phenomenon of the mind to his satisfaction, up until he came across this guy. And so basically what this physician later claimed was that there were only 2 cases of individuals that he had not satisfactorily been able to write off as just delusional individuals. And one of them was apparently this person that he had been brought to him, or he had been brought to treat. And as it turned out, apparently they got lots and lots and lots of readings from this source, and eventually those readings indicated that this channel was chosen as the channel through which a new revelation would be given to mankind on Earth. So this begins to sound something kind of like The Principles of Nature by Andrew Jackson Davis. The difference being it was apparently more structured, more important, if you will, more thought out. There was more organization behind it in the higher realms. It was more deliberate, perhaps. And it was, I guess the book says that it was given as in a way, and in the sense that the life of Christ was one type of revelation, and then so therefore the scriptures we've got from that are a very, very kind of dumbed down and obfuscated kind of revelation, in the sense that they're not really pure or clear. They've been altered, and they were never that clear in the first place, I guess. But this, in a way, a new type of revelation, if you will, a new type of Bible for a future generation, for a generation down the road that will be much more receptive to this idea that the spiritual realms can be contacted in waking life, and we can get more information for them, that our Earth does have a place in the grand scheme of things, and we have kind of a responsibility, if you will, to be more aware of our place and to contact those realms outside of us, on and on and on. So it claims to be a new type of revelation. The reason it's given now is so that a few people that really do respond to it can be trained, or train themselves, I guess, as teachers, so that down the road there will be a handful of individuals that are familiar with the work and able to serve as guides or teachers based upon the work, or something like that. But anyway, so on the surface level, all you've got is just another work from channeling psychics. In this case, instead of a question and answer form of readings, apparently there was a lot of question and answer stuff that went on, but as far as the book is concerned, it was in the form of just a straight up reading presented as a paper. So they would get it like all at once, from top to bottom, a given paper, I guess, and then they would ask questions and maybe clarify a few points or something, or get a subsequent paper or something. But so on the surface level, it's just another channeled work, more like The Principles of Nature by Andrew Jackson Davis, because apparently it was delivered that way. But still, however, the difference being, apparently, that the Book of Urantia is communicated not through the higher self of the channel. Instead, the book is communicated by specific entities in this grand hierarchy of organization. I mean, if you think about it, of course, there would be officials, there would be people of varying status with different responsibilities, etc., etc., and so there were different types of individuals in different walks of this life, if you will, in the realms beyond, that were given responsibility for delivering different pieces of this narrative. So not all of the readings were given by entities of the same class. Apparently there are a few that were given by very advanced entities, and some of them that are given by entities a little bit lower down the line. But everywhere it was the type of entity that would be the most appropriate for presenting whatever the topic was. You know, the one that would know the most about it, or be the most familiar with it, or have the most helpful point of view. But in every case, these are not man. These are not mortals that started out on these realms of the flesh like we do, and then progressed beyond. These were all entities that if they did do that, that they're far advanced. However, I don't think so. I think almost every single one, if not every single one of the entities, were the types that were never man, such as angels of various types. And there's apparently this whole structure, and the word angel is way too restrictive. Apparently this whole structure of types of angelic beings and things, and they have names for them all. Just I think for the sake of clarity and organization, they have all kinds of proper names you've never heard of before in this Urantia book, and it probably makes it sound like science fiction, and it's going to turn a lot of people off, but I think it was necessary just to present such a complex organization as apparently does exist out there. They have to have proper names for them, and sure, they may not be the exact names that they use, and apparently words as such aren't really used that much in spiritual communication in the realms beyond, but nevertheless, for us, they had to give them names and things, so there are names for each of these classes of entity, and several different types of entities at any given point would be given one of these papers. So in a great sense, it's very different, because through like Paul Solomon and Casey and things, I guess it seems you would only get an angelic being or something communicating through the channel very rarely, and a lot of times it would be just kind of a tag at the end of a reading. This entity would pipe up and you'd get something different, and it would say, I, Halaliel, have spoken, or something. Or once in a while, like there's this Paul Solomon reading, number 80, I think it is, that is on wisdomofsolomon.com, where a guy's got a bunch of older readings. There was this reading where the Archangel Halaliel apparently comes in and says, well, the normal course of the day is going to be ignored, and he apologizes to the person that had asked the question, but he said there's something more important I have to say, and instead for this reading I'm just going to deliver a message, and he goes on to deliver this huge discourse in the course of the reading. That type of thing is more like what you find in the Book of Urantia, except in the case of the Book of Urantia, it's the whole book, all 2,000 pages. So, not without precedent, but somewhat different than the other channels, and the content is somewhat different. Some big differences are like reincarnation. Reincarnation isn't presented in the same way in the Urantia book. Now, currently, the way I'm interpreting this is I'm interpreting it as the entities responsible for giving the Urantia book were not allowed to talk about reincarnation. I don't know why, but apparently they were not. So apparently any mention of it, I mean, they do talk about it in terms of a superstitious belief of human culture. So as much as human religion and superstition came up with the concept of reincarnation, they'll talk about that in their historical narratives in that part of the book. But as far as it being part of their cosmology, they expressly say there's only like one type of reincarnation, and it's some type of entity in some far removed type of system that has nothing to do with the earth. And that's it, according to the book. So either that's a deliberate misrepresentation because they're not allowed to talk about reincarnation, or there's some other explanation. And so that's just pretty much where I'm at with that. I'm not sure what it all means. But and there have been some very helpful individuals in the comments or messages I get from my past addresses where I talk about these discrepancies, where they've said things like, "Oh well, this planet is unique because of the rebellion that occurred, and the fact that this planet was kind of cut off, and perhaps because it was set up by the evil entities involved." There is reincarnation on this planet, even though there's not reincarnation normally, or it has something to do with that. And that could very well be. I haven't run across anything that specifically says that kind of thing in the book itself, but it definitely not outside the realm of possibility. It sounds like a very good explanation to me. And there are discrepancies about, well, I guess I wouldn't really call that a discrepancy. On the surface, there seem to be discrepancies about the Immaculate Conception of Christ and things, but you read about his portrayal, and it's very clear that almost nobody in the universe even understands the profound mystery of how God himself, if you will, or a son of God himself, you will, could incarnate in the flesh as a man. So there's a sense in which there's a real mystery there. And so there's going to be different explanations of that. And I don't know, in some sense, maybe there's a real mystery behind reincarnation, in some sense, where you're just going to have to get different viewpoints on that. And I did mention earlier this idea of parallelism and timelines. Maybe it has to do with that. I don't know. But definitely, as these other viewers have pointed out to me, it's definitely true that the Book of Urantia is given from a different perspective. It's given from the perspective of the outside in, the top down to the bottom. So you have the viewpoint of these high level supervisors and rulers and things of the higher organizations above the earth, that type of viewpoint about what happens on the earth, and a more global viewpoint about typically on inhabited planets, what's it like, so they're trying to tell a much larger story, whereas with the typical types of channels like Edgar Casey on most days and Paul Solomon and things, you would get just personal information for us. That's kind of what this thought adjuster, this higher self, that's what it's supposed to be there for. It's for each of us to help us through our day-to-day struggles and things. And it's right down to the nitty-gritty viewpoint, basically from the bottom up, from our viewpoint. And so maybe that's why the information seems to be quite different, is because it's different from a different perspective. So from that perspective that you get from a typical channel, they talk about reincarnation all the time, as in we have apparently had lots and lots of different lifetimes, and it's all part of this process of growth. We grow through each lifetime and learn more and more, and we can have incarnations on other planets and things, and that definitely jives with the Urantia book. In fact, what it indicates is that after this mortal existence, usually you just go straight on to the higher realms, and you're continually progressing. You're not trapped in this kind of loop, which is what a traditional understanding of reincarnation would be. But apparently, according to these readings from all these other channels, there is a loop. There is a cycle of karma that a lot of us have gotten stuck in for many, many different past lifetimes, and the goal being that we break out of that cycle and move on and progress like we're supposed to. So, yeah, some discrepancies and things, but boy, I definitely have a great respect for all these things I've found so far. All these 5 channels that I've found so far, definitely great respect for the Urantia book, and definitely great respect for the reading I've been given already from Douglas Cottrell, and the readings he continues to give, shedding a lot of new insight onto day-to-day topics that are perhaps more relevant to us, such as coming Earth changes, such as basic science that we don't really understand. One example being when you have an earthquake in Okinawa, and then a day later you have an earthquake on the other side of the planet in Chile. Those aren't two unrelated circumstances. In fact, it's one phenomenon of the energy traveling all through the crust of the planet and refocusing on the other side. Basic scientific things like that for whatever reason aren't typically known about or acknowledged or haven't been discovered yet by modern science. So it's very helpful. And if you're interested in that kind of thing, just go to Ramston Regulin. instead of having me spell that, just look up Douglas Cottrell on YouTube. Cottrell is Cottrell, and Rumston Reglan has just a bunch of videos up there for Douglas Cottrell. Or you can go to Douglas Cottrell's official website, just Google him. His web page is like the first thing that comes up, and they've got links to a lot of those videos from Rumston Reglan on YouTube. So he's keeping us kind of up to date on the new stuff. And the reading I got, he led me on to the field of radionics, because it had to do with some of the scientific research I'm interested in. And the viewer that just chimed in about radionics, telling me that it's definitely possible to build your own machines, thank you very much. I was kind of discouraged for a while that these radionics devices that you can currently buy are so expensive, and it did seem from the description in the Delaware book that Douglas Cottrell told me to read. In that book, it seemed that it was fairly elementary for someone who knew about electronics and things to construct one of these machines, because they didn't seem to be that complex as far as the mechanism. So I think I'll be talking to that individual a little bit here and maybe get some help with constructing some machines of my own to get to use them. But yeah, so there's a lot of interesting things going on currently with the current readings we're getting from Douglas Cottrell. Hopefully we'll get more sources communicating soon and get a lot more information coming, and it sounds like there's some great things afoot. So definitely not a dead field. It's not dead in the sense that I'm finding out about historical sources that I never knew about. It seems like every few months I'm finding out about more, and also there apparently will be many more. And I'm not just talking about David Wilcox or somebody who claims to be Edgar Casey and then gives us these things that I would not call proper reading and claims that they're the same thing or whatever. I'm talking about quality sources, quality channels giving us this type of reading. It seems that we definitely will find more, and there's a lot of exciting things to come. So I look forward to the day when there's so much new information coming out every week from these channels that I can't even cover it all in a weekly address. And I guess then we'll just have to start giving people the high points like the newscasters do or something. But yeah, so if you're just new to this whole thing and just stumbling across it, there's a really rich field here. A lot of things going on, a lot of information that's really valuable, and a lot of insight to be gleaned. As much insight as anyone can handle. You stumble on something as rich and clear as of a revelation as the Urantia book, and it'll really knock you off your rocker. And I definitely am beginning to understand how we're only given as much as we can handle, usually. And if it's too much for you to handle and you just can't take it, just fine. Put the thing on the shelf for a decade or so, and if you ever feel so guided, come back to it later. If not, that's fine. It's not, obviously by no means is it necessary for everyone to espouse all this stuff that comes from all these sources. But for those of us that are interested, it's just a wild and crazy ride. There's lots of incredible stuff going on, and lots more to learn all the time. So to that end, that's what I'll try to continue to do with these weekly addresses. Hopefully I'll get back on a weekly schedule and keep you guys abreast of things as I discover new things, present them to the world, and try to present what other people are sharing as well. So continue to share and enjoy, and until next time, carry on.